Hello, everyone. I'm Colin Fogarty, Executive Director of Confluence. We're just going to take a few minutes to let everyone get settled in. Welcome to the program. We're so glad that you can make it. We're going to start the program shortly, but we have a big audience today, and we want to give everyone just a few minutes to log in, get all your tech set, make sure you can hear the sound, and make sure that you are all connected to the live stream. So thank you so much for joining us today. While we wait, a couple of housekeeping items. We're live streaming this on Facebook and on YouTube, so you are welcome in either one of those to comment and ask questions. In fact, if you want to comment now and let us know you're there, just let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. And that's also where you can pose your questions and make any comments that you'd like, because this is a discussion. If you suggested questions when you signed up for the program, we have those. I've got a list of those. But if you didn't pose any questions, last portion of the program. So a little bit about Confluence, if you're not familiar. Our mission is to connect people to the history, to the living cultures and ecology of the Columbia River system through indigenous voices. And we do that through 5 completed art landscapes along the Columbia River in collaboration with tribes and with the artist Maya Lin. We also do this work in schools where we connect teachers and students with indigenous educators and artists, and we do that virtually these days, of course. So you can also see our mission in our digital library of interviews and photo galleries and so much more at our website, confluenceproject.org. And finally, we advance our mission through public gatherings like this one. We wish we could do this in person, of course, but we're so glad that this also gives us the opportunity to invite so many more people that can attend this event virtually than could have in person. So thank you for joining us. I also want to make sure that you know that Confluence is a community-supported nonprofit, and that means we can only do this important work with the support of the friends of Confluence. And you can become a friend of Confluence now or anytime at confluenceproject.org. Thank you for your consideration for that. And now to our program. This conversation is a collaboration with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and you'll hear from the head of the BEF shortly. And the program is also part of Promise the Pod, a coalition of folks bringing together multiple habitat restoration programs with the goal of saving Puget Sound orcas, the ones we all love. And this program is called Towards Reciprocity, Orcas, Chinook Salmon, and the Columbia River. So what does that mean, reciprocity? Well, what you'll hear in the program is our speakers kept coming back to the theme over and over again, that everything is connected. In obvious terms, it's the orcas of Puget Sound that are directly connected to the Columbia River system because they rely on the salmon that come from here. But reciprocity means much more than just that. We are all connected through the environment, through our actions, and through our relationship collectively with the land and the water that we share. So just a technical detail, when we do go to the program in just a second, you might see a slight delay as we transition from one portion to another. Don't be alarmed, we're all set, we're solid here. And we recorded this conversation just a few days ago, but our speakers are standing by live and will come back to the program at the end of the recorded portion of the program to answer your question. And once again, any questions you have, just put them in the comments section and we'll pose them as many as we can when we come back to the live Q&A. Okay, with that, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Thank you to Promise the Pod. And now I'm going to turn it over to Todd Reeve with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Todd Reeve, and I'm the CEO of the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. I'm so pleased to welcome the distinguished speakers today, and I'm grateful for their lifelong commitment to the health of regional rivers, streams, estuaries, and oceans, and the many living things, including people, that depend upon these systems. At BEF, we work nationally to support a future with a stable climate, healthy watershed ecosystems, and growing reliance on renewable energy resources. We are proud of our work with tribes, businesses, utilities, and community partners. In our watershed work, we talk about taking a long-term approach. For us, that means decades. What is humbling and inspiring about the panel of speakers with us today is that when they talk about long-term, they're looking back to many generations of ancestors and are looking forward to many future generations. On Orca Recovery Day, we're here to build momentum and celebrate a growing network of caretakers who are working to improve habitat and salmon runs to feed the 74 remaining southern resident orca. These orca depend on Chinook salmon from British Columbia to Northern California, and we know that their survival means healthy water, thriving forests, and fish runs for the benefit of all of our communities. We have much to learn from these speakers and their approaches, and it is with great honor that I would like to introduce the following. Wilbur Slokish. Wilbur is a member of the Yakama Nation and a hereditary Klickitat chief. As a boy, he fished at Celilo Falls on the Columbia River and has spent his life concentrating efforts on native-driven management of the Columbia River Basin fishery resources and protecting reserved treaty fishing rights. James Holt. James is the vice president of the Buffalo Field Campaign, whose mission is to protect Yellowstone's wild buffalo herds and their natural habitat. He is a member of the Nez Perce tribe and has been given the belief that his relationship with the natural world is sacred. For James, his academic background in environmental science and professional background in natural resource management formalized the science behind the spiritual and cultural knowledge of the Nimipu or Nez Perce people. Deborah Lekanoff. Representative Lekanoff has served as a public servant to citizens for more than 2 decades, serving the 40th Legislative District in Washington State, tribal communities locally and nationally. She is a member of the Tlingit tribe and the second female tribal member to serve in the Washington House of Representatives. Representative Lekanoff sponsored House Bill 1578, which passed in 2019 to help with orca whale recovery and oil spill prevention in the Salish Sea. I'm incredibly honored to be a part of this panel and so appreciative of the collective work represented in this discussion today. It's with great honor that I introduce these panelists and look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
I'm Wilbur Slokish Jr. I'm a Klickitat. My original homeland's here along the Columbia River. From the Dells Dam on down, that's where my people resided, all the way down to the Willamette Valley, and did coastal trading and got separated though, but they moved our people north and south, and some of us still stayed here in our original homeland. And I've been involved in this ever since 1953 when a state game warden come down and harassed my father for fishing on the Klickitat River, telling me that he was no longer in uniform, so he was just damn dirty savage again and leave those fish alone for the other people that work 40 hours a week. That was my introduction in 1953 to how the so-called sportsman, recreational fishing, what it meant to them, just something to play with on a weekend, and not realizing it provided us with a lot of the things that we needed for our harvest opportunities. Everything is connected, and we need to rebalance that back into our mind thinking. And I hope that this little part is everybody has a role in that, whether he's a irrigator or a farmer. Don't need chemicals. Chemicals are bad for everything because chemicals are in everything, and our systems aren't used to chemicals in our bodies. That's why we're got the high incidence of all of these diseases that we've never had. So that is the goal that I strive for, is a rebalancing back into the natural creator given role that he said for all of the animals. So I hope that's a little part of what I think, because the main thing is now is water. We don't own the water because this Columbia River doesn't start just here or in Idaho, it starts in Canada. And all of the other drainage systems that come into that feed into that water base, and it goes out into the ocean. The ocean is not a dumping ground. I always seen commercials of the industry dumping barrels and barrels in that river into that ocean, not knowing what it was in the interest of economic gain. We need to balance the economics with our lives. We can't buy a life back, but we can sure get shortened, because I remember my old people 100, 110, 115, and they walked upright. They were strong because of the foods that we had. And now 60 and 70 is considered old. We're lucky to reach the age of 80. I'm 76, but I feel good. So we need to balance that, because that is our history. Our cultural passing is from these older elders that know these things, that survived those things, that have the knowledge of how it was.
Wilbur, thank you for your words. I really appreciate that. It helps to ground me in this talk today. You know, when I did get elected onto tribal council, I was 25 years old. I was at the time I was afraid for our treaty rights, when I really didn't understand what it was my government was doing in my behalf. You know, so in typical Indian fashion, I went and raised a ruckus. You know, and then I learned that in fact they were doing really good, and I was just raising a ruckus. You know, but in that process, I got to become the chair of CritFic, and it really opened up my world to just not just the enormity of these issues that we face, but in how capable Indian country is at leading us out of these predicaments that colonization has placed upon us. You know, it's my honor to push dam breaching, those 4 lower snake dams here at Nez Perce country. And that was, at the time, it was a very controversial issue. It was brand new. You know, the dam operators were still trying to operate and give us this normative river paradigm where they could operate the dams and act like a real river and it'll fix everything. And not much has happened since then. So it was really interesting for me to learn, you know, the connection to the Orca down there in the estuary, to figure out that that southern population was hanging out in the Columbia River estuary at the same time that our rapid river fish, our Selway River spring Chinook, were ready to run up. And then we found out, you know, through those studies, those scientific studies, that you know, they can prove it. They're, you know, those rapid river fish, those Selway River fish, that's the Orca diet, and those runs not being here anymore is really impacting the Orca in that regard. You know, I was really glad to hear you bring up so many of those impacts that affect our homeland, because, you know, quite often we get caught up in those real big impacts of the dam, and we want to dive into the controversy, kind of like you didn't want to say his name. You know, that mentality has brought division and separation, and it, you know, now we're led to believe that coalition building and reaching across the aisle is impossible, when that's just our nature to do that. Because like you were saying earlier, you know, no matter what presidential or what administration or what policy impacting Indian peoples or the land, we are still here, and we are empowered. And it was those traditional ways that, you know, have allowed us to carry on. And so we go and we address these 10-year forest management plans in our homelands, and we get with the soil and water conservation districts down at the local level, all to try to address these water quality issues. You know, we still have little planes flying around dropping their pesticides and herbicides from the air right above our communities here. And so right along with the fish, right along with the water, we get sick. we're carrying these sicknesses now, as we mentioned, you know. So we have to, like, holistically, from the smallest stream in the most remote part of the forest, that's our challenge. You know, we're advocating against the Stibnite gold mine up here on the Salmon River, a button pristine wilderness, and yet we have to fight against that gold mine, chasing greed and chasing money at the expense of our future generations. So we get to address those issues and press on, you know, speaking for the buffalo, understanding that the impacts to the orca are the impacts to the buffalo, and it takes us all to come together to speak for the landscape, to realize that everything is one, and we're not separate from it. And so it's you know, it's always been an honor to know that in the back of my head I'm trying to do those things that my elders taught me, you know, because when I stepped into this realm of helping tribal public policy or advocating for natural resource, fish recovery, for brother buffalo, it's always been those elders that show us, you know. Now it's our elders telling us, bring the children, you know, bring the children. They have to know, they have to hear. And our children are stepping up, you know. They're asking us, how were you there? How were you present? How did you learn so that I can learn too? You know, mend that hoop for me so that I can be as strong or stronger for those that come after me. It's amazing. You know, we're being told that we should be divided, and yet behind the scenes we feel that unification coming. We feel it bonding, showing us that it's possible. And so, you know, those are a little bit about my background. Just being able to take my place, hoping that, you know, looking at myself as an intermediary. I'm just one of those guys that's marking time, hoping that I can possess enough knowledge to give it to that next generation, because they look like a whole generation of heroes, you know, and we've been waiting for them. You know, that's kind of how I feel. I appreciate being a part of this process, and hoping that we can discuss this in a way that empowers the basin and empowers everybody to come together and solve these complex issues. Grazie.
Goodness, Chish, for both of your words. It's good to be sitting here with both of you. My Tlingit name is Hixchasi. It comes from the little spring areas up in your tributaries where the little baby frogs grow. It is that time of change. I am Tlingit and Aleut. My grandmother's people are from Yakutat, located in Southeast Alaska. My father's people are located in Southwest Alaska, out in Pribilof Islands. From my mom's side, I'm the Salmon people. From my father's side, I'm the Seal people. So to make my friends Wilbur and James laugh a little bit, when you can bring seal and you can bring salmon together, you get something unique like Deborah here. It's an honor to be with all of you. Growing up on the shorelines of Southeast Alaska, I grew up much thinking the same way as my friends sitting here. I found that fine balance of the quality of life of respecting my culture, my teachings, which brought me to the laws of making my judgment as I sit on the People's House on the floor of the Washington State Representatives as the only Native American to currently serve in the entire state legislature. I follow the good teachings of Senator John McCoy, who served for 20 years in the Washington State Legislature, and the teachings of Senator Claudia Kaufman from Nez Perce, James, who served as a first Native American senator woman in the state legislature. It's these teachings that bring something of a unique decision-making process to a Washington State elected officials, and that is to make 7 generations of decision-making. For elected officials, you normally make a decision based on a biennium, based on a budget, based on a 2-year cycle. For us as Native American people making our decisions, we make it with balance. As my kind friend Wilbur says, we make it with generations to come, as James says. As a mom, years of a pollution-based economy. As my friends here tell us, we've seen pollution based and spread across North America, from north to the First Nations, down throughout America to Alaska, down through Mexico. We've seen the poison that they feed our waters. We've seen the poison that they feed our forests. We've eaten the resources filled with those poisons that fill us with the diseases that we never had before. My decision making isn't to say no to the growth, no to the economy, no to industry, but to say yes, but to make those decisions based on the way that we've been taught, to not take as much as any more than we need, to not poison the land that we walk on, to not poison the waters that we drink, and to not poison the resources that feed us. The decisions I make on the floor of the people's house as my friends say today, and one hand behind us holding the generations yet to come. The voice of the killer whales have echoed across the Pacific Northwest. They've stretched from the whitecaps of the mountains, down through the waterways, through the rivers, through your Columbia waters, out to the Pacific Ocean, in through the waterways of the Salish Sea, up through the shorelands, through Alaska, down the shorelines of California. We are all touching one another. We are all embracing one another, just as the killer whales have. So to have the talks with Wilbur and James today, it's important for me. It's important because I was that little girl standing on the shores of Yakutat, watching the killer whales, running in the skiffs to my dad's net with my dad and my little brother, with the killer whales running next to us and racing us in our boats. I was a little girl coming down to Washington and witnessing something I thought I'd never knew. And that is the fact that there were no wild salmon left in Washington state. What little salmon there was left, the tribes were trying to preserve. What little salmon were left, the tribes were trying to share with the killer whales. From there forward, I knew that it was going to be a responsibility of mine if I were to call Washington State home, to bring my Thlinkit and my Aleut values into that decision-making process, into this united voice that I hear, that only people that look like us, who have the same hair color as us, who eat fish the way we do, and who hunt the way we do, will once value that. So my hope is that, again, I will have 30 more Native Americans serving in the state legislature, serving as Congress, sitting in elected positions at the local, state, federal level, striving to be the next senator, striving to be the next mayor, striving to be the next governor, striving to be the next president of the United States. I think we can do that as a Native people, and this is my hope and dream for the next generations to come. So that is who I am and why I'm here today.
I was a thorn in the side of my tribal government for a long time, and I guess to shut me up, they put me in the Tribal Fish Commission. So I know what it is to be a thorn, and I'm still a thorn in the side of the state of Washington and their game department. I think I made Guy retire. He's on the Northwest Power Council. So
you might have been a rose amongst many.
I hope so. Yeah.
It's important though, James, you and I talked about the value of understanding the work that we've done from learning from Wilbur and learning from so many of your elders. I have elders up here in Washington State that mentored me, similar to what you went through, you know, running behind and sitting and working with Billy Frank Jr., who speaks for, you know, the salmon, the owls. Wilbur, I know you. Been from Tulalip, just one of the warriors from up there, Joe McCoy. There are so many elders, Jimmy Wilson from Lummi. There are so many elders that I got to sit and learn through many generations of how to carry the tribes surrounding this area. It was a wonderful experience to have them take this young Alaska girl who had the foundation of where I come from, to know when the tide is out, the table's set, and to teach me to understand Washington state treaties and how to intertwine that with the state government as co-managers, and how to manage that trust responsibility at the federal level, to understand how to bring science, policy, and law together. It's been, we talked about the School of Hard Knocks, that your aunties and uncles signed that degree for you, Wilbur. I too went to the School of Hard Knocks of Washington tribal leaders. Tribal leaders from Idaho, Oregon, California, 571 tribal leaders across Washington state. And it's a learning experience. And boy, they can be tough. Holy smokes, they can be tough, huh, James? And you got to learn that tough way. You got to learn to be still and be quiet and know where your place is and know when your place is. It's part of the teachings that we have from our cultures of fishing, of hunting, of being in the longhouse, of being on ceremony. That's just who we are as Native American people. And that's how I believe in my own thoughts as a mom, as a woman, as now.
Summer I got to go to Yelm, Washington, and there was a medicine gathering of the old sacred ways and the old ways that we know, but also to really ramp up the play, you know, all that him-han that the federal government has did over these last years, you know, that inaction is now coming. It's coming home to roost, and it's a time for us to get back to those old ways in preparation for what's to come. And it was scary, you know, to hear these elders speak in this way. And it was then that they also shared that we have to tell the youth and that we have to get them geared up to take these battles. You know, it's kind of like what was mentioned earlier is, you know, we do these things that we're called to do because, you know, we may not make it to the finish line with the people. You know, it's important that we take our place and we take it seriously because, you know, it takes everybody. You know, the tribal restoration plans for salmon is ridgetop to ridgetop, and to involve as many cultural ways as we can as we try to bring the salmon back and speak for them. When I go into the sweat lodge, I'm blessed with this little body of water called Spring Creek. You know, it's 6 feet wide and not even a foot and a half deep. But in the summer months, you know, we'll be swimming with spring Chinook getting ready to spawn, and then they'll finish, and then the steelhead will come, and they'll do their thing, all while we're sweating and swimming with them while we're holding ceremony. The coho will come and swim with us. And so, you know, it's really important that we see what we're fighting for. And I bring my children there like I was told to do. You know, I tell them about everything that the tribe is doing, hoping that, you know, something sticks and that they will choose that red road, you know. And in this modern day, it's so hard to compete with the screen and compete with the so many other things that can draw the attentions of our people away. And so, you know, we stay dedicated to the water. You know, we go out into the landscape and we learn those places. We take those sacred steps out there so that, you know, our children can take those intentional steps too. It all adds up. You know, hopefully that all these cumulative steps that we do will mean more to the Orca. You know, every little tributary that we fight for out here, I had to go back and remind myself, you know, just how many tributaries and how many ways the different tribes are out there. You know, it's wildlife biologists, it's fisheries biologists, it's technicians at the weirs, it's cultural resource specialists. You know, it really does take our tribe to do these things. And, you know, it takes our elders to teach us and guide us. And, you know, hopefully we'll continue to all step up and pull each other along, as you said. You know, it could never be a more important time.
Yeah, you mentioned Billy. He was the witness at my trial there in tribal court when the federal government was accusing me of stealing 40,000 fish. He was a witness, expert witness that we had, and we were found not guilty. So they go back a long ways. And I did go to Alaska for some consultation up there with some of the people on issues. And they were showing me how the water was melting, and because now the permafrost was exposing barrels of stuff left behind by the military. We were up there for 3 days. My friend Gilbert from San Ildefonso Pueblo, and a Chicano guy from Cuesta, New Mexico. And then our last day, they had a big tribal feast there. And so I've experienced eating whale, seal, all of those. And I said, geez, I thought it was elk meat or moose meat. And I said, boy, this is pretty tough moose meat. But I got it. And so I've eaten the foods from up there. And because they asked me, are you gonna eat here? I said, I was raised, if it's on the table, it's edible. Don't thumb your nose and disrespect somebody else's food when you're visiting places. They're putting it on the table, it's for you to eat. So I did. And I'll tell you, man, I was wondering why them crackers were next to the seal meat. I learned on the plane back.
Oh no. Yeah, you gotta eat crackers if you eat seal meat if you're not used to it.
Yeah, that soaks up the oil. So, you know, that's one of the things there though is maybe if I can, I've got a video about that fishing struggle that I'll give to Colin so he can get it to you.
That would be great.
Yeah, and that was in 1981, in anticipation of expecting changes to the Black Bass Lacey Act, making tribal misdemeanors federal felony. It wasn't a law when they started out, and they signed it in November, and they started that in April. So I had a 3-year government-sponsored vacation in various prisons around the country, and but I'd do it again in defense of the salmon. That's how much it meant to me, because they were blaming us for everything declining when it's their own activities, whether it's financial, farming, or industrial practices. Aluminum plant is the one that poured fluorides in that river, and 40,000 fish weren't missing. They spawned in other areas there. And it's important to notice there that each dam, Bonneville Dam, flooded out many spawning beds, Wind River, Eagle Creek, Herman Creek, other areas in there. The Dalles Dams flooded out spawning beds right below John Day Dam. Nice big salmon spawned in that area. So it wasn't that accidental, it was intentional. That's all.
That's, it's the stories like this that are so very important. Wilbur, when you're speaking to the foods that you ate where I come from, the seal oil, I could go on and on, the ooligans, the salmon, all 5 species of salmon, the moose meat, all of these resources are so intertwined in who I am and where I come from. These foods build me, they sustain me, they're intertwined in my name, they're intertwined in my songs, just as your resources around you are intertwined within your songs and your ceremony. These resources, from the killer whale to the salmon to the owl to the raven, I'm raven people too, Wilbur, to the eagles, to the herons, to the little hooligans who fish through, to the seals. We look the way we look, we speak the way we speak, and we live the way we live because of these resources. It's hard for me to try and remind others who don't think and breathe and laugh like us that we fight so hard to sustain these resources. And you're right, James, we may not get to the end of and finish the race and get to the end of the win, but the next generation will. And we're fighting so hard to protect our resources and our environment because we don't want to be on the endangered species list next to the killer whale. That killer whale is starving for salmon just like we are, starving to eat all the good little foods and the fishes there just like we are. Their tummies are turning up empty. They're so poisoned. They're so poisoned, and their babies who are dying are so poisoned from the waters that they have to take them to a toxic dump. This is not what our America is as First Americans. This is not who we are as First Americans, as First Canadians. We have a responsibility in your role as an elder, Wilbur, in your role as a young leader raising the next generation, me in my role as a state representative, to continue to educate and intertwine our decision-making values into all governing levels, into citizens, into the person sitting next door, sitting in the chair next to you at Starbucks. Tell them about the story and what you know. As you're at, of course, wear your mask and use social distancing, of course, but we have a responsibility to teach the next generation, the people sitting next to you, the people you lead with, the people you negotiate and argue with over a project, to understand that you're making a decision that's going to impact these resources that sustain who we are, or else we become a shell of what was. And we can't afford to do that. I don't think our people around us understand when we're making a decision to save the habitat and to save and protect in-stream flow, and to make sure that we don't put 300 homes against a mountain where the in-stream flow is, that once that water is gone, then all those little baby frogs and the habitats are gone. Therefore, my Indian name, Hichasi, is gone. That way, my name that is goes back since time immemorial will not be passed on to my daughter's daughter. It no longer exists. We are the definition of environmental justice. The killer whales are the definition of environmental justice. The salmon are the condition of environmental justice. So when Wilbur, when you are talking about all those poisoned places that are in our communities, all these areas where underrepresented people live, if you take that map and you lay down a pollution map on top of it, you're going to see in those rural areas are where the most polluted areas are.
We talk about the Snake River dams, you brought up some good points that reminded me of that. They tied the orca diet to these Snake River species, and now we know that those Snake River dams kill 50 to 80% of the juveniles migrating outward. They're decimating those fish, and they've changed the water table so much that those Hell's Canyon dams are methylating mercury from previous generations of gold mining. So we're being attacked from all angles, and it's going to take a holistic solution that involves everybody. And we've dispelled the myths of the loss of barge traffic or the loss of irrigation capability and capacity of the 4 lower snake dams. We've dispelled enough. Even Clearwater Power and the Northwest Energy Coalition, other these energy producers are saying, we're afraid that your EIS doesn't go far enough. You have to do more for clean energy. You have to do more to speak for the water and the resource. I mean, something's wrong when we have these smaller electricity districts stepping forward and saying, you have to do something different.
We followed the words of our Creator, because one of them asked me about that, and I said, He gave us to us orally, and He knew you guys would forget, so He gave it to you in written form, and you didn't like them, so you broke them. And at that time, I was at a Pacific Salmon Commission meeting, and I was watching them, and they were arguing. And I said, this reinforces the words of my grandfather. He said, the white man is crazy. He has to have a book, write down his words, so in the future, he can look back and remind himself of what he said. We don't need a book. We follow our teachings and follow our stuff that's handed down from us from the previous elders. He said, because he knew we would not forget his ways. But him, he has to have it written because he forgets what he said. That's why he opens that book. And that's what they were doing. They were arguing, and that book was the Pacific Salmon Commission book that's got the treaty language in it. And they all went quiet. And I said, and the other thing there is, why did these guys have to have these ties on? They're cutting off the oxygen to their brains, and that's why they're not thinking. So loosen your ties.
But isn't that the truth, Wilbur? Like, up here, we all celebrate our salmon ceremony. It's like before we go hunting, we have ceremony. Before we go berry picking and gathering our cedar, we have ceremony. Up here in the Northwest, we have the salmon ceremony where we give back and we share a song and we talk to the salmon, welcoming them home. Go to the Four Corners and we share the skeleton of the salmon and wrapped in cedar, and we give it back. And this comes from Tulalip in the Gobin family. And think about this, and while I'm sharing this story, is when you look at how dirty the waterways are, how polluted our rivers are, how dirty our sediment in our lands are, when grandfather King Salmon gave us Mother Earth and he said, take care of Mother Earth. And when he went back to the water, he comes back to check on us. And if you don't take care of us, we can't take care of you. similar to the way many of us around the nation think of Mother Earth. When we all were told to stay home, if you looked out, you could hear Mother Earth taking a breath. The killer whales came back, the salmon came back, the birds came back, the deer came out, the raccoons came out. I live out on Samish Island, and my whole front yard is a big bay. Every animal came out. Hummingbirds were everywhere. The bees came out. Mother Earth took a breath, and her resources did. When King Salmon comes back to look at us, waiting to return, if we don't do our due diligence as caretakers of Mother Earth, of taking care of his place he's called home since time immemorial, they're not going to take care of us. And that's the teachings that we have to remember when we come back to sitting at the table and negotiating, whether we're talking about the Snake River dams, whether we're talking about the 9 coal terminals that were once supposed to come out here to the Northwest, that we as Native American people stepped together with, whether we stood at DAPL on Standing Rock with the Standing Rock Sioux, thousands of Native Americans saying, no, we cannot afford to pollute Mother Earth, whether we're standing on the shorelines singing to the killer whales. We have to remember those teachings. And I come back to the Coast Salish people up here in the Northwest, and I listen to their teachings, and they're so intertwined with mine in my Tlingit and Aleut way. And they're so intertwined with all of yours that I can't help but think that the next generation is going to be much, much stronger than what we're doing here today. As we continue to bring them forward, James, we continue to hold their hand and bring them forward as Wilbur and them did with you and I.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty blessed. We're pretty blessed. There's hope. I think that's what keeps us here, generation after generation after generation. It's the hope.
Yeah.
I got asked, why do you do what you do? I said, I got to answer to my creator. When my time up on this world is, I tell him I did my best to protect the gifts that you have given us. That's why I do that. I want to look him and tell him that everything I did to protect the gifts, I did my best. I fought my best. And I think I'll be there with him, but I don't know if I'll see you. So that silences them too quite a bit.
I'll remember that line, Wilbur. When I'm standing on the floor of the people's house and I have to give testimony to protecting salmon or climate change or the resources, I'm going to say, let me share some good words from my friend Wilbur.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah. Food for the heart. It's food for the heart.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much to our speakers who are now joining us live after our recorded program. Thank you all so much for, oh, this is great. Representative Lukanov, we have you on the road. Stay safe. I hope you're safe. Thank you all for joining us for this live portion of the program. For those who are just joining us, I'm Colin Fogarty, Executive Director of Confluence, and we've been listening to this conversation among our speakers, Washington State Representative Deborah Lukanov, Wilbur Slakish. Your words are so good and warm, and we really appreciate them. And James Holt, Nez Perce, joining us from Lapwai. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you. Oh, and we have a dog. Representative Lukanov, who do we have there with you?
Well, my daughter and I are just getting landed, and she's driving. And this is Cedar, as in the cedar tree, my little partner in crime.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So this is the live portion of the program, and I do want to just remind folks joining us on YouTube or on Facebook, if you go to the comments section, feel free to post any comments or questions that you have for our guests. Listening back to the program, I was really struck by what you all were talking about and the connections between the orca and the salmon and the rivers and the land, and also among people, the connections among people and what that means. So why don't I get us started, or Wilbur, would you get us started on this portion of the program with the question, what strikes you as listening back to that conversation about those connections, and what does reciprocity mean to you?
And that's a word I'm not familiar with, Colin. Yeah, I have trouble with this English language. And I let them know that because they can make words mean different things that to suit their needs at the time. Uh, I think you're asking me how do I feel about it? I feel very strongly about it because these have sustained us since the beginning of time, when they were all lined up, telling what they were going to do for the coming people. And when the Creator placed us here, they explained to us what they would do for our people. And I think that's what you're asking. So that's my answer is we still follow the promises made to each other.
Well, forgive me, Wilbur. I think you articulated it even better than I could with a fancy word like that by saying everything is connected, and that's all I was asking about. And I think you articulated that better than anyone, and then better than I certainly could.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I get into a lot of things, and one time I got asked what are my convictions, and I started telling them all the times I got thrown in jail for fishing and all of that, and they said no, not what I mean. I mean your feelings. See, so that's why I have this trouble with this English language because they can make things mean different with just one word.
James, what struck you listening back to that conversation?
For me, it was definitely that intergenerational tie, and that cultural, spiritual relationship that we have to Creator, and how we interweave those two together so that we make it where they're joined together as we, look to the youth and look to the earth. How can we best, look to our Creator and go to Him in a good way at the same time as empowering the youth and those generations that come after us to 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 tackle these issues in the best way they can, and go there with the same spirit and heart that we were given. That was a great theme, I thought.
And thank you, Colin and James and Wilbur. It's so good to see you. Wilbur, I found the picture of you and I with Warm Springs and Yakima leadership in Yakima when we all gathered for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Climate Change Conference. So I'll send it to Courtney so she can send it to you. It's a good picture of all of us.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah. I think one thing I really want to stress to the folks that are listening, I come from Southeast Alaska, spending 20 years in Washington State with the Washington tribes, spending it with the 57 tribes of the Northwest, and then honoring and getting to run with 571 tribes across the nation. But when I sit down and I talk to James and Wilbur, I'm just an Indian girl a native girl coming from Southeast Alaska again, sharing the values, sharing the conversation and the love of the resources, sharing our Indian names. Mine is Hikchasi. Sharing the love of the food, sharing the love of our family, our ancestors, our community. But and I think back and I listen to us, the thread that binds us together is how much we care for everybody else who calls our wonderful place home. How much we need others who don't look like us and sound like us to love the earth and the resources in the same way we do. The three of us can't think any other way, Colin, except every decision we make is going to be 7 generations. Every decision we make, we wonder how my daughter's water is going to taste 20 years from now, and whether or not my granddaughter will even have water to taste. whether my daughter will have cool and clean water, and whether the salmon will have cool and clean water. Those are the things that we think about as we make decisions.
And thank you so much, Representative. Oh, did you have one more? Did you want to keep going? Okay.
No, no.
Live is always more challenging technically, and so I appreciate all of your patience, and thank you for doing this. You know, so we've been getting a lot of questions, people who signed up and people who've been commenting, and I'm seeing a general theme, and that is about action today and responsibility today. And let's begin with you, Wilbur, with the question: what do you suggest people do? What do you think people can do to help the habitat and the condition of Columbia River salmon today, so that therefore those salmon can be there for the orcas?
Was that for me, Colin? Because you were breaking up.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, Wilbur, do you want to start us off on that question of direct action, or what actions that people can take today? What suggestions do you have for people today to help salmon?
Recognize them as the senior water rights holder, because that water is their home, and they were in there first before any dam or any irrigation part was pulling that water out, and that water did irrigate, but it was through the rain, and the lands that they thought were idle, you know, they were producing food and medicines and birds and meat, hoofs and antlers, ones, and recognize who the original uh, water rights, land rights holders, because they're moving into their home countries and destroying them because they think they're being fed. So, you know, the grapeyards and the timber companies and all of those, they need to realize that's their home, and they don't destroy it and pollute it. They take care of it because that's where they live. Same as we do. We take care of where we live. We take care of the land, because one of these days, you know, we're going to go back into that Mother Earth, and I don't want to go into polluted place. That's all.
And James, what are your thoughts on that question of what can people do today to in everyday life help salmon?
I think we definitely need to keep using our places, especially those places along the waterways. You know, we need to pass down the place names of those locations. We need to take the people there and have ceremony, use them in the way that we used to use them. We need to go into those arenas where they're deciding the outcomes of these waterways, the operation of these dams, and we need to give testimony on those things that we still use in these waterways and the importance of that water. I think Wilbur hit it on the head. You know, they're trying to change the beneficial use of these rivers and waters, moving them even further away from prioritizing fish and salmon and endangered species. So we need to continue to hammer away that the natural world needs to exist, that it needs to persist, that these species that rely on the natural world and clean water matter to us. And wherever we can do that and however many times we have to do it, we just have to keep showing up, empower the youth to show up.
Yeah, I think you know, I have to agree with my friends here. My big message today is we've got it's a big get out the vote. Vote and get people such as myself and those who listen to Wilbur and those who work with James. You need to get people who are like-minded like us into office to start making those policy changes and upholding those regulations and funding those programs that sustain this quality of life that we're all striving for. Um, not only vote, but stay active and engaged. Make sure your voice is heard, because you're speaking, as Wilbur and James say, for the voices that are unheard. You're speaking for the first water right holders, the winged, the hooved, the finned, the ones who have roots into the ground. That is so beautifully said, Wilbur. And when I stand on the floor of the people's house, I am going to share that quote, and I'm going to tell them who I learned it from is the elder that comes out of the Columbia River, who fought so hard to carry the voices of the past and the voices of the future with you. Um, it's to make sure, Colin, that you you walk the walk and you talk the talk, and you can say as much as you want that you want clean water, you want clean air, you want clean resources, clean habitat for the resources, but you have to live that life, and you have to make sure that it goes down to the next generation, as James said. And it's just not the generation that looks like us, it's all the generations now that call this place home, because we're so intertwined into those communities.
Representative Lekanoff, one question for you, and then James and Wilbur, if you have thoughts on this too. You alluded a little bit in the recorded conversation about how much educating you have to do for your colleagues. What is that like, and how much education do you have to do, not just for environmental policy, but just the indigenous perspective on the environment and life today? Do they get it? Like how much educating do you have to do? Do you find yourself having to do?
It's an educational moment every day, all day. I am in meetings from 6 in the morning to the East Coast, all the way back until 7:30 in the evening. And almost every one of my conversations is either educating on the connectivity to the resources, to the laws, to the policy, to the treaty rights, or it's educating on thinking indigenously, which is a long spanning way of thinking, whether I'm looking to protect um, healthcare, whether I'm looking to expand education to be diverse in the way we think in our communities, in our indigenous communities, James and Wilbur, but also whether it's even talking about building green infrastructure. What does building green infrastructure mean? And what do you mean? It's going to be more expensive to build green infrastructure. We should just build it as it is because it's $1 less. But no one is really thinking carefully that the dollar we spend today, if we don't do it green and we don't do it right, we're going to spend $6 more down the road, and my daughter's going to be paying for that and making the decisions that I should have been making now with my fellow legislators. So it's not a frustrating moment. It's a moment of quite to be frank, I'm honored to be the one to be talking to my colleagues, talking to organizations, engaging with business, engaging with industry, but it's the voice of the teachings that came from the people who built me, and that is either tribal leaders, governmental leaders, organizations, or my grandma, cutting fish with me as a little girl, or my mom picking berries with me, or my sister talking to me, or my daughter saying something as honest as this: mom, you have to let people know that they have to vote because their lives depend on it. So it's every day, all day, Colin.
Yeah, Colin, one of the things there is they need to get out of the sense of domination over the land, because they use quotes out of the Bible: dominion over the land. No, you live with it. You don't try to tame it. As they talk about, we had to tame the mighty Columbia River. Well, that tameness has led to what it is now: cesspools, dirty water behind those dams, sediment pollution. When that water flowed, it brought nutrients down into other areas caused by those floods. And floods were not bad. You just don't live in the floodplain. So that's a lot. What they need to learn is that stop practicing dominion, live with it. Stop trying to tame the animals. Stop trying to tame everything.
Yeah, I think we also have to continue to assert those things that we are doing to speak for the water and speak for the fish and the land. Um, we can go back to the spring season, shortened season up here in the tributary, and going out to the tributary fisheries on the Little Salmon River, and we can get into conversations with anglers, and they can tell us that those Indians just need to get their nets out of the water. We'd have more fish, you know. But at the same time, we can fast forward into now, and these same people who are screaming about us to get our nets out of the water are benefiting off of a unprecedented season on coho that the tribe restored and recovered to the basin. And there wasn't a coho fishery here in the Clearwater River without the Nez Perce tribe stepping forward and recovering that species of fish. So we're constantly having to educate the public, the non-tribal public, as it were, these good things that we're doing. And sometimes we are the lifeline of these fish runs. We are the lifeline that's holding them, in place. We're often the only thing that's speaking for them, and we definitely have to have a louder voice and a broader voice across the landscape, so more people can truly understand what it is that we're doing and assist us in doing these things and doing it together as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, James, because a lot of the questions that we have been getting from people online and people who signed up have to, have to do with just that subject. And the way one person put it was, how can we better center tribal voices in efforts to address the plight of salmon and orca? In other words, and I guess the follow-up to that is, what does that mean? If we as a society were to take the indigenous perspective on the Columbia River and orcas, how different would it be? I mean, and I guess and I ask it to help people understand, like, how do we get there to a native perspective on these issues when we seem so far away from that now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're not toys. The orcas aren't a zoo. They're living in their natural habitat, but yet economic interests treat that where they live as a place where they can go see them like they do the animals that they have trapped and placed in zoos and aquariums. That's not their role, and they're not to be saying, "Well, we can catch it and release it." That still harms them because they pull it out and pose with it, and that takes the protective barrier off the salmon, and he's susceptible to diseases more. And you don't know how many times he has been handled. So stop treating them as toys and zoo animals, and let them be in their natural. And leave them alone. They don't come to you and watch what you do in your home. But yet these ships up there in Puget Sound and along the coast, whale watching boats. Get your seat. Stop treating them that way. That's it for that one, for me.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, I agree, and I also think there's a disconnection where people need to understand that what they're doing on the curb out in their front yard has an impact on the orca as we lead up the chain, the food chain. I often get into this debate with people talking about where these frontline communities are and where are those places that matter, when really, if you live in this Columbia Basin, it matters. We can track those orcas back to certain tributaries, the mainstay diet of the salmon in the Columbia Basin, but really it all matters. We need the eels that benefit the orca when they're out there living their lives, and eel habitat matters, and a lot of those tributaries, people have a disconnect of what they're doing in their own backyards, and linking that to the life of the orca, I think, makes it much more real for them. And we have to put that message out there that no matter where you are in the basin, you're on the front line, helping or hindering the life of the orca, and elevate that voice.
Representative Lukanov, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just I think if you're asking us to how do we take our laws and our values that we've been raised with that are intertwined within our bloodline and look at today's society and ask, society is asking us how do we think like you? I think I would say that I don't know if anyone could ever think or decide and place our values into theirs unless they've been born this way, raised this way, and it's transitioned generation after generation. But to learn to respect and honor that every place that you live matters, every action you do matters. Whatever pesticides you're putting into your lawn, that's going to run into the stormwater, that's going into the water where the resources are, that matters. Not being socially responsible, not being politically responsible, the decisions and policies that we're looking to implement. It takes every person, whether you're industry, whether you're a politician, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a mom, an entrepreneur, an auntie, you all have a responsibility to be able to address and protect the environment and the resources and find that within yourself. You don't have to be like a Native American to take care of the environment. You just have to base it based on your own and be your own person. It takes a lot to do the right thing. But if you stop pointing the finger the other way and looking at the other person and what they're doing wrong and look at the mirror and try and figure out what you could do right, then we'll all be in a better place.
Yeah. Well, and thank you all for those. And James, I loved the story that you told about the sweat lodge where you are in Idaho. It seems is so far from orca habitat, and yet there's a direct connection. The same salmon is coming through the stream right there. Do you think that people get that? Do you think that people understand that connection when the ecosystem is so vast and yet is so integrated as well? I mean, how do you explain that to people?
Education and outreach. I was flabbergasted when I found out that the life of the orca in that early part of the year, through what was it, January through April, live out in that Columbia Basin estuary, and they feed on those Selway and Rapid River, those salmon river species. You could go out into that area, you can see, the needs of the landscape, whether it's you know, deforestation in some parts of the tributaries or channelization another part of the tributaries, and really get down to brass tacks of we have restoration plans, we have population targets for every tributary in the basin. Help us hit it. Let's pull those targets back out and put them in our hand and look at what real numbers we used to have and what we used to have as generally accepted recovery, and see where we went wrong. Let's truly understand, and prioritize water. I think we're going in circles when we finally go back to the beginning and say that, we just need to do what's right. And every basin, we can pull out that in your area, your neck of the woods. We can talk about fisheries that you fish or you're acquainted with, and really start making a difference with those stocks right there. We can start there.
Representative Lukanov, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I was talking about the small world that we live in and how intertwined and connected James and Wilbur and I are in the places that we've walked. James, I remember you and I talking to EPA and the Army Corps about the environmental justice when we were protecting the waters of the U.S. Years ago, when both you and I sat on the National Tribal Caucus and the Regional Tribal Caucus, advising the EPA administrator to do the right thing. It was years ago that James and I were talking about protecting water, and we're still talking about protecting it today. But I tell you what, James, it's probably been many, 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 many years ago when Wilbur started talking about protecting water, and he's still talking about it today. The issues will never go away. The challenges will never go away, but it's that hope that we have every day to know that although Wilbur, James and I were sitting in Washington, D.C., talking to their deputies about protecting water, we knew that the next generation behind us that would be talking about water would be able to share the same words that we're sharing and the same teachings that we're sharing of protecting our resources, our water, and our environment for years to come. So, James, I've been trying to think of where you and I have met because your voice is so familiar, and it came to me a couple days ago, and I got even more excited, my friend, of how more intertwined our worlds are together.
Yeah, we've between the three of us, we've been up and down the coast, up and down the basin, all over this country, advocating for those things that are dear to us, and it's always good to cross paths.
Yeah. Well, listen. Oh, go ahead, Wilbur.
Yeah, one of the things there is that we tend to forget because at my little school down here in Wishram, the kids were telling my kids, how come we waste fish? We just catch them and throw them on the bank. And why do we go hunting deer just for the antlers? And he come back and he says, these kids are telling me this. And what do I tell them? So I set up a meeting with the superintendent, and it just happened to be around the Thanksgiving Day. Uh, so I had a dinner for them, and I brought all of the food sources there and placed them on the table. You know, salmon in a jar, and deer meat dried, and roots and berries. Then I brought in the hides and laid it there, and I said, and the salmon, the fish you're talking about are the carp and all of those fish that are predators to the smolts. And I said, we don't waste the salmon. This is what it does for us, and this is how we take care of it. So those kids that got that education from uh, their parents went back and explained to them. And the next year we had 3 times the amount of people that were at that dinner. And it's been an annual event for 18 years. But this year we're not going to be able to do it because of this pandemic. So that's one of the elements we need to do is to connect, to have our children start education, the kids from the other citizenry, because those kids changed that tone of that town's uh, animosity towards us over the fish that their tax dollars created, and all of that. So we don't waste it. We don't do anything with that. So that's one of the elements is their young people need to connect with our youngsters and learn that history, that we don't waste anything and we don't just kill it for the pleasure, or harvest, catch it just to be pleasurable. And now they call it recreational fishing, and it's not. Fishing is our life. And so that just that little deal there. And they said, what do you call it Thanksgiving? I said, well, you guys had the first dinner there, and you go, and when people brought the food, you got here and tried the same thing, and instead of giving, you started taking. So that's why I say that Thanksgiving Day. So, but this little town, and it has newcomers, and they come, and I tried to stop it last 2 years ago. I said, Jay, I've done this long enough. I have to uh, raise the money. I have to do that to uh, compensate for the dancers and the drummers, and I donate the food though. While my grandkids do now, they do the hunting and they do the fishing for that event, and So that's one little thing there is our young need to start reaching out and in the school system and disputing a lot of that and it needs to be put into the school curriculum as part of the new stuff that they're doing in Washington State, and I think we need to expand that to include those things. We don't waste any of that because it's a gift that we strive to take care of. And I'm sorry to say that we have not going to have it this year because of the virtual learning. So that breaks to, I'm pretty sure it's 18 going on 19. And now I can go down there and all of the ones that live in this little town, they all greet me and talk to me and tell me stuff. Before I was no good. I was a fish thief. So I was stealing their resources. So that little education, it's got to start small and build.
Thank you, Wilbur. Thank you for that. And I've heard so much about that event. I'm so sad that that it's not going to happen this year, but hopefully it'll be next year. And what I love about this conversation, and we can even hear in the room there with you, Wilbur, the future generations. And at the end of the recorded conversation, and I hear it here, all three of you coming back to the future generations and what their education means for the future. So to wrap up this conversation, and unfortunately we're out of time, I just want to give you all just a chance for any final thoughts.
Yeah, that's my grandson.
Yeah, that's right. I hope he's fishing.
He come up and check on it again. He's only 2 years old.
Oh, okay. All right. So maybe a little young to fish at this point. When you look at the future generations, are you, and also just how do you square, I suppose, the plight of the salmon, the plight of the orcas, and yet the hope that future generations can give us? How do you balance hope for what's to come and despair from what's lost?
Well, the voices of the young are going to be the ones that bring that message here, and we just need to keep educating our youth, but they need to reach over to the other side, as I did with this little school group down here, and they did wonders to their parents.
For me, in my neck of the woods, the youth are empowered when they realize that they are the prayers of our ancestors. For us, often, like in my own home, we bring it back to that history we've come from. We talk about the Nez Perce War, 1877, the role of the chiefs and the warriors that were involved there. They had to press on and do these things to ensure that we continue on. And now here we are today, the birth of their prayers and their hopes. And so it is up to us. We can't allow them to lay on the side of the trail. Our ancestors didn't get to lay down. They had to press on for us to be here. Now here we are, it's our turn. And I believe in you. I believe in them. I believe in the youth. Every time I go there and I tell them, I've been waiting for you. You are my hero, just by having the understanding that you do of this world we live in. Now let me give you these tools. Let me help you in this way and empower you to take this standard and march with the flag forward.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I just have to tell you, we wouldn't be here as Native American people. We would have never survived the turmoil that we've went through. We're talking about disparity today, but for generations, the Native American people have been wiped out. Um, sick and blankets wrapping around us, going to kill us through boarding schools, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, termination, the Dawes Act, tax them out of their land, taking away our fishing right, putting their thumb down, putting us on reservations, cut our hair. It is take away our languages, take away our culture, burn down our longhouses, kill all of our buffalo, kill all of our salmon, kill all of our seals. Tell us we can't whale, but we're still here. We're still here because we have the hope. We have the hope in the next generation, and we have the love of our ancestors and the respect, as Wilbur says, of everything they've done to get us here today. And we will do twice as much today to get the next generation to make sure the next generation have hope. We live in action as Native American people. Our language is an action. Our thoughts are an action. Our prayers are an action. Nothing is ever standing still for us. And so for me, people may think this is just so hard during this time, and it is. Don't get me wrong. But we'll make it through. We have to make it through. And that's where we come in as Deborah, James, and Wilbur. You've got 3 generations here working hard, all bringing our shared experiences. And we all walk along the same path, helping one another. And there's many, many, many more of us. So in Indian country, I think James and Wilbur, the leadership always says we're part of that. We be here today. We be here yesterday. We be here for generations to come.
Wow, thank you so much, Representative Lakanoff. I think James said it best. It's food for the heart. Your words are food for the heart, and I really do appreciate that, and I appreciate all of your words today. Thank you so much, Washington State Representative Deborah Lakanoff, and James Holt, and Wilbur Slockish. Thank you so much for all that you have shared today. Before we go, is there anything that you want to add that we haven't said that you want to include?
We're not done fighting. We're going to continue because if my aunt told me, said, if you stop fighting, they've won.
Good one. That's what I say. Our women are strong. So our children are happy. So our warriors can press on. So we're still here. We're going to keep being here.
Well, and thank you all. Thank you. And I hope if you can see the comments that we have been getting, they're just I know the audience that has been listening in from all over, from Seattle, from Portland, from the coast. And Wilbur, I want to make sure you know from Celilo Village, Lucy Begay writes, thankful for Wilbur being on this platform representing our bands along the Ichiwana, the Columbia River. And I just wanted to pass that along to you to make sure that you saw that message. But I think I speak for everyone who has been listening and for Confluence that we are so grateful to you for sharing today. And we really do appreciate this. This has been a really tremendous program. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that we will, when this is done, this will be posted on our website on confluenceproject.org. There was a question from a teacher about whether she can use this in her 7th grade classroom. And I say, please do. Please use all the resources, all of the voices. There are many excerpts of an interview that we did several years ago with Wilbur on our website, and you can hear more from him. There are other programs, including a podcast that James has been on before, and so many other programs. Please use those in your class. Please check them out. And I also want to just make sure before we go, that we do have another event coming up. Next Wednesday, October 21st at 7 p.m. The program is called Responding to a Pandemic, an Indigenous Perspective. And this is a collaboration with the Sense of Place lecture series in the Columbia River Gorge. And if you go to our website, confluenceprojects.org, you can find out more for that. Sign up. That's going to be a Zoom call, so you have to sign up for that. So please please do. And I also just want to end with making sure that you know that Confluence is a community-supported nonprofit, and that means we can only do this important work and bring voices like this and programs like this with the support of the Friends of Confluence. And we've actually got 2 new friends who've joined during this program. Thank you for that. You can become a friend right now or anytime at confluenceproject.org. And I want to end by thanking our partners at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation and Promise the Pod. This is the first time we've partnered with them, and we've really, I think our speakers just hit it out of the park. So I really, really do appreciate them and their collaboration. And I also, you haven't seen the people working behind the scenes to make sure this happens, and that is Program Manager Courtney Yilk and our Digital Manager Lily Hart. Thank you to them. This wouldn't have come off if it weren't for them. So thank you to them and to everyone who has made this program possible. So thank you all, and be well and take care, and so long.
Yeah. Thank you, Courtney, also for helping me. See you later. See you guys down the road.
Take care.